What's the latest in the Israel-Hamas War? The IDF has recovered the bodies of 6 Israeli hostages, all of whom were kidnapped alive on October 7th and died in captivity. Hostage negotiations continue, however the different teams are reporting stalemates on all fronts, casting doubt on the concluding summit that was due to take place in Cairo this week. Ongoing escalations between Hezbollah and the IDF, while Hamas has claimed responsibility for an attempted suicide attack in Tel Aviv a few days ago. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive deep into the latest on the Israel-Hamas War. On day 319 of the war, the main highlights relate to the IDF retrieval of 6 bodies of hostages from the Gaza Strip. Also, the hostage negotiations are ongoing, but stalemates are being reported on all fronts, ongoing escalations between Israel and Hezbollah, and there is also flare-ups ongoing in the West Bank and continued fighting in the Gaza Strip. Starting with the retrieval of the 6 bodies, the IDF retrieved 6 bodies of hostages from a tunnel in Khan Yunis. All 6, Yegev Buchstev, Alex Danzig, Avraham Munder, Yora Metzger, Nadav Papawel, and Chaim Perry, were kidnapped alive on October 7th and died in captivity. Between March and May, Hamas had published several videos reporting about the deaths of 5 out of the 6 hostages whose bodies were retrieved. Between March 1st and March 9th, the movement published 2 videos stating that Yora Metzger, Chaim Perry, and Alex Danzig were killed in an IDF airstrike in the Gaza Strip, alongside 4 other hostages. The 4 other hostages were not among the bodies of those who were retrieved today. In addition to that, on March 23rd, Hamas published a video stating that Yegev Buchstev died as a result of a lack of food and medicines to treat his injuries in the Gaza Strip. And on May 11th, Hamas published a video stating that Nadav Papawel was killed in an IDF airstrike alongside another hostage. Again, that other hostage was not part of the bodies who were retrieved today. Since then, the IDF had confirmed those deaths as well, with Avraham Munder being the only one who was not confirmed dead until today. Regarding the circumstances of their deaths, while Hamas had reported about the circumstances of 5 out of the 6, the IDF reported today that the bodies were discovered in a tunnel in the Hamid region of Khan Yunis, in an area that the IDF had operated in 6 months ago, i.e. largely matching the time frame that Hamas has stated for the 4 hostages, stating that they were killed in an IDF airstrike at the beginning of March. According to the IDF, the tunnel that they were located in was itself not bombed, and armed Al-Qassam guards were also found dead in the tunnel. The assessments published today stated that the IDF bombing in the region may have caused a fire to break out near or inside the tunnel, causing both the hostages and the guards to die from asphyxiation. It was also suggested that it is possible that the hostages died first and their bodies were being guarded there, explaining why the other bodies of Buchstev and Papawel and Munder were also brought there, and that the guards died as a result of that fire that may have been there at some point. Either way, I will state, however, at this point that is speculation. The IDF said that the investigation of the circumstances of their deaths are still ongoing as far as the IDF is concerned. Hamas put out those videos stating how Hamas says they died. Hours after it was reported that the IDF retrieved those bodies, Hamas released a 1.5-minute video showing a collection of the different hostage videos that have been released thus far. The video includes many images of those whose bodies were retrieved alongside other hostages, some of whom, according to reports, are still alive, and concludes with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu stating that he is doing everything he can to bring the hostages home, and this is done against the background of a verse of the Quran stating that the devil makes false promises. With this, the total number of hostages remaining in the Gaza Strip is now 109, of which the IDF has confirmed that 36 are considered dead. Different sources, however, have reported in the past months that both Israeli and U.S. intelligence estimate that there may be as few as 50 hostages who remain alive in the Gaza Strip. Again, those are unconfirmed reports, however, they do match to some extent some of the negotiation patterns that have been about how many hostages are being negotiated, or at least live hostages are being negotiated. However, officially, the numbers are that there are 109 hostages in the Gaza Strip, of whom 36 are considered dead. On the negotiations front, in my last summary on August 17th, I reported in detail about the formation of 4 negotiating task teams that are meant in the past week and in the coming week to make advances on the different negotiating fronts, all leading up to a concluding summit meeting that is supposed to be in Cairo either at the end of this week or the beginning of next. While, as I stated, it was likely to be the case, 2 of these task teams did not even meet. The team that is making most headlines is the Israeli-Egyptian negotiating team that was tasked with finding a solution to the Philadelphia line, that is the border between Gaza and Egypt. According to reports in the last several days, the teams have met, however they quickly arrived at a complete stalemate, with the Israeli delegation presenting maps for an IDF staggered withdrawal and maintaining strategic presence along the Philadelphia line, which was not only outright rejected by Egypt, but reports indicate that Egypt stated that it would refuse to even present this to Hamas out of fear that such a suggestion would lead to a walkout and a complete collapse of the negotiations. Meanwhile, the United States has attempted to propose a compromise on many of the sticking points in the negotiations, and while this compromise has not been made officially public, parts of it were leaked in the Saudi Asharq newspaper on Sunday, and other parts were leaked in the last several days. According to the leaks, among others, the U.S. compromise proposes, first, that negotiations on the final ceasefire will only take place in the second phase of the deal, not begin in the first phase of the deal, which was an initial Hamas demand. In addition, the U.S. compromise suggests limiting the IDF presence along the Philadelphia line, but not a complete IDF withdrawal from the border. It also stipulates that if Hamas does not accept certain Israeli demands during the negotiations of the second phase, then the IDF will be permitted to resume fighting in the Gaza Strip. Another thing that was leaked is that, according to the U.S. compromise, Israel will have the right to veto up to 100 Palestinian prisoners from being released. However, I will say that different leaks suggested that it may be 65 out of 150 of the heavy Palestinian prisoners. Others said 100. What is clear is that the compromise includes some veto power to Israel, but not clear how much. It also stipulated that the Palestinian Authority will be brought back in to manage the Rafah crossing under certain Israeli supervision that is yet to be determined. And finally, it also stated that a substantial amount of Palestinian prisoners that will be released in the hostage deal will be expelled from the region. This largely matches a lot of the Israeli demands, but not all of them, since Israel said, for example, will not accept Palestinian Authority in the Rafah crossing, and also Israel said that it will not necessarily withdraw from the Philadelphia line. Again, it's also important to again state that these are unconfirmed leaks and the actual details of the compromise have not been made public. However, in the last several days, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been visiting the Middle East, and after his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Blinken publicly stated that Netanyahu had accepted the U.S. compromise. Now, again, I will state Israel has not confirmed what Blinken said, and Netanyahu instead issued statements after statement stating that he is still standing firm on the red lines previously outlined. In fact, in a meeting that he held today with different, more hawkish right-wing movements in Israel, he publicly stated that Israel would not evacuate Netzarim Corridor or the Philadelphia line. Some analysts suggested that possibly U.S. Secretary of State Blinken deliberately stated publicly that Netanyahu is in favor of the current compromise in order to, quote-unquote, lock him in to a situation where he could not refuse the deal, otherwise he would be seen as the one who torpedoes it. That is speculation at this point. What we do know, the U.S. proposed this compromise, not stated exactly what it includes. The U.S. Secretary of State stated that Israel has accepted it. Israel has not confirmed that statement. Either way, while in Israel there's ongoing political infighting about this deal or not, with the majority of the security establishment in Israel, including the IDF, the Shabak, and the Mossad, being in favor of a deal on the one hand, and Netanyahu's hawkish right-wing coalition threatening to overthrow the government if the deal is accepted on the other, Hamas has been issuing extremely pessimistic statements in the last several days. The movement was updated on the results of the Qatar summit, however, it did not approve any of the teams that were established to continue negotiations, and moreover, in the past days, Hamas issued statements rejecting the proposed compromise from the summit meeting, saying that these compromises, quote, answer all of Netanyahu's demands, including postponing a permanent ceasefire and the idea of maintaining its presence in the Gaza Strip, i.e. Hamas is referring to, possibly, the leak of the U.S. compromise, stating that deferring the negotiations to the second phase mean that they will continue endlessly. Hamas is not getting its guarantee of a complete ceasefire in the beginning of the hostage exchange. In addition, Hamas added that the U.S. compromise allows the IDF to continue its presence along the Philadelphia line, the Netzarim Corridor, and the Rafah crossing, and that the movement is adhering to its agreement to the proposed framework from July 2nd. Right now, there are conflicting reports about whether or not this concluding summit is going to take place in the coming week in Cairo. I'll again emphasize that while this meeting may take place, none of the negotiating teams have reported any success thus far. All we have seen is the U.S. has proposed compromise, and then the U.S. said that Israel agreed to it. Israel has not confirmed to that. Hamas has rejected this compromise. The only team that did meet has reported a complete stalemate, so it remains to be seen if this summit does take place, if a breakthrough can take place during the time until that summit. Right now, all the sides are issuing extremely pessimistic statements, while the United States is issuing more optimistic statements. Remains to be seen if they can actually materialize. Alongside this, other news emanating from the war in the last several days is the intensified escalations that are ongoing between the IDF and Hezbollah. Just today, there were several barrages of over 40 to 60 rockets that were fired by Hezbollah into northern Israel, and swarms of attack drones that were also launched. And the IDF retaliations were reported throughout southern Lebanon as well as deep into Lebanon itself. A particularly substantial bombing was reported in the last several days in the Bekaa Valley region of Lebanon, with the IDF reportedly targeting weapons warehouses of Hezbollah in the region. I will add, however, that while these more intensive escalations continue, the majority of attention is still being given to the expected Hezbollah retaliation. I remind everyone that Hezbollah has vowed, alongside Iran, to retaliate for the assassination of Fuad Shukr, the group's chief of staff, who was assassinated on July 30th, and the group has reportedly outlined its retaliation and is waiting for the opportune moment. According to some reports, it is waiting for the negotiations to collapse so that Hezbollah will not be seen as the one who torpedoed a possible ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Remains to be seen how this will develop and what type of spiral this may lead to. In addition to this, another arena that I've not reported about in a while, however it continues to flare up, is the West Bank. While I'm not going to get into all of the flare-ups that are going on in the West Bank in detail right now, it is important to note that there are ongoing escalations throughout the entire West Bank, with major IDF operations being carried out in Tulkarem, Nablus, Tubas, and Tamun, among others. In addition, there have been several incidents of Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians, as well as violent Palestinian attacks against both Israeli settlers and IDF soldiers throughout the West Bank. With all this, however, perhaps the most important development in the larger context of the war occurred on August 18th, when there was an attempted major attack in Tel Aviv when a seeming suicide belt detonated prematurely, killing an attacker and injuring a passerby. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad both claimed responsibility for this joint operation, attempted attack that occurred. They put out this statement a day later, vowing to carry out more such attacks emanating from the West Bank, inside Israel, inside the Green Line. At this point, I will say, however, in a moment of analysis, that the statement made by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad has to be taken with some measure of doubt. First, neither organization published the name of the attacker, which is quote-unquote standard practice for the groups, particularly in cases of suicide attacks. In the claiming responsibility, they state the name of the attacker. In addition, the fact that it took the groups an entire day to claim responsibility, and they did so jointly, yet provided no information about how the attack was carried out, also is very uncharacteristic behavior for the groups when actually launching such an attack. That said, the Israeli Shabak and the Israeli police are confirming that this was an attempted Palestinian attack, so it remains to be seen, once the body is identified, who the attacker was and how much validity these claims of responsibility have. Either way, this appears to be a very dangerous and meaningful escalation in the war, as it may lead to more flare-ups within the West Bank. Alongside this, in the Gaza Strip, the ongoing fighting continues. The focal point in the last several days has been the ongoing fighting in Rafah and in parts of Khan Yunis. The fighting has continued in Rafah in the Tel Sultan region and in the different areas of Khan Yunis, particularly the Abbasan region in the east and the Hamid City region in the west. In addition to this, there were substantial airstrikes that were reported throughout northern Gaza in the last several days, one targeting the Mustafa Hafid school in the Ramallah region of Gaza City. The IDF reported that intelligence confirmed that the school was being used by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as a headquarters for launching terror activity, while Palestinian sources reported that at least 20 Palestinians were killed in the attack, saying that the school was being used to house internally displaced Palestinians. Regarding the updated figures of casualties in the war, the IDF is reporting that 330 IDF soldiers were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began, and 2,227 IDF soldiers were injured in the Gaza Strip all since the invasion began. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 40,973 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and 92,857 Palestinians were injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. I remind everyone the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip does not distinguish between civilians and militants. According to the IDF estimates that some 17,000 militants of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terror operatives have been killed in the Gaza Strip, so possibly that is 17,000 out of that 40,973. Those are my highlights from the last several days. If you have any questions or comments or would like clarification on anything, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and an Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.